Hey there, how's it going everybody? Dan here with plantabundance.com. So I'm out in the backyard once again getting a new garden bed prepared, and I felt like this could be a great opportunity for me to share with you some of the protocol I use when breaking new ground and getting a new area prepared for planting. As you can see, I got my digging fork out and I'm loosening up the soil. Previously this area had a nice thick layer of cardboard covered with wood chips. So now I've pulled back the wood chips, cardboard's completely degraded and eaten by the worms, and because I had that nice mulch on there, there's absolutely no weeds or grass to contend with, which is really nice. Now I have a lot of previous experience establishing garden plots where that wasn't the case, so the only difference is that I'd be spending a couple hours pulling out the weeds and grass before planting out my crops. And there's other methods out there such as lasagna gardening, which works really well, but over the years I've developed my own way of doing things, and I actually prefer to prospect the soil when I'm doing my first planting. It allows me to level things out the way I want. And also you'd be very surprised how many times you might find some aluminum cans or plastic bags or urbanite, just odd things that end up in these urban landscapes especially. And this also would be the right time to add any amendments as you see needed. You can do a soil test and figure out what you would need to add. I've chosen not to add any amendments this time around. The wood chips have done a great job over the last couple of years breaking down, and the soil is loaded with worms and their castings, so this will suffice. But if you were going to add in some amendments or fertilizer, I'd suggest using things such as organic compost, worm castings, organic chick manure. I try to stay away from things like the horse manure and cow manure. Those definitely have a place in the garden, no doubt. But in the case of horse manure, if it's not completely composted down, a lot of times the grass and weed seeds that the horse is eating on passes right through its system, and those will start to pop up in your garden, so that's not fun. And with cow manure, most of the cow manure these days is coming from factory farm situations where the cows aren't eating right, they're not living a good life, so I try to stay away from that. But with that being said, I designed this garden to be 8 by 8 square feet. And the reason why I chose that dimension was because I'm going to put a little pathway right in the middle, which is going to give me approximately a 4 by 8 foot garden on each side. And that's going to allow me total access. Whether I'm standing in the middle of the garden on the pathway or along the edges, I'm going to be able to reach into the garden and do my gardening, my tending, or my harvesting without having to actually step into the garden, damaging any plants or compacting the soil. That's why many times you see the smaller raised beds are designed 4 by 4 square feet. That's because you can reach into the center of the garden from all sides, allowing you to not have to step into the actual garden and disturb anything. So I'm just using some fence boards as my pathway. Now that I've forked up the soil, I'm just top raking it and getting some of the excess wood chips off and some of the larger clumps of soil. I'm first going to be planting out a Three Sisters garden. This is the very popular Native American way of doing companion planting using corn, climbing beans, and squash. So the corn is going to act as a trellis for the climbing beans to climb up. Those beans are also going to help to fix nitrogen in the soil. And then the squash is going to work as a living mulch, helping to shade out the midday sun, keeping the soil nice and moist below. So for that, I'm going to be using some of this golden bantam corn that I grew inside on my LED grow light stand. And I'm going to be using 2 types of beans and also a pea to climb up the corn. And before I get those planted, it's important that you inoculate the beans and peas. This is going to ensure a higher rate of success. It's going to help increase your yields and just keep your plants healthy. And just a little bit of inoculant goes a really long way. So you're just going to mix a bit of the inoculant with water per the instructions on the package. And after you got the beans or peas coated, you're going to want to plant those right away. I'm using my Hori, my dig knife, very convenient tool for doing my plantings. And as you've seen in the past, if you've been following along, I'm going to be sprinkling a little bit of Mycorrhizae around the roots of my transplants. This is going to help with the water and nutrient intake and just creates a more resilient plant. And next to the base of each corn plant, I'm plugging in a couple bean or pea seeds. Now that that's planted, I'm going to be putting in some spaghetti squash as my living mulch layer. And these are seeds that I saved from last year. I've had really great success with the spaghetti squash. But don't be afraid to get creative with this style of a garden. You could use things like crookneck squash, calabash gourds, melons. So experiment and see what works well for you. So on the second half of this garden, I'm going to be planting some of these eggplants, which again I grew from seed indoors on my LED grow light stand. So I'm just spacing these out where I want to plant them first. And I planned out this garden so that the eggplants that I'm planting, which only get about 3 feet tall, are going to be in front of the corn, getting the most southern exposure. You wouldn't want to have your taller crops like the corn in front of the eggplants, shading out all the sun. So it's important that when planning out your garden, you take into consideration the pattern of the sun and plant accordingly. So now that we got the garden planted out, and that was easy, right? Now I'm going to show you a tip, something I came up with, and a really easy way to help protect the plants. Now I'm primarily protecting my garden from my dogs and my chickens. We got a lot of wildlife and birds in the area, but these particular crops are not crops that the birds are going to really go after. And because they're a bit larger as I transplanted them out, they're not as likely to become damaged and die if they do get nibbled on a bit. So I've been using this technique for several years. It works great. This is just some 4-foot wire fencing, and I just cut it to the appropriate length. Then I just bend down the edges just to give it a bit of height, and this works great. It's easy to move around. You can always unbend the fence and use it as a fence later if you want. But I found this to be more convenient in my case rather than actually building a fence around the entire garden. Everybody's application is going to be different, but at some point I'm going to be taking these cages off, and then I'll just have a nice open garden landscape, and that's how I like it. Now, if you are contending with birds harming your crops, you could also cover this wire fence with some chicken wire, as you see here. This is very effective. This will keep out all the smaller birds as well. So now I don't have to worry about my hyperactive dogs tromping through the garden, and I also don't have to worry about my curious chickens scratching through that nice rich soil. So that's it, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope if you have land accessible and you haven't yet gotten into gardening, I hope you can find a way to plant a little garden this year. And I'm sure you'll find, just as I have, that gardening is so much more than just growing your own nutritious and delicious food. It's about connecting with nature, meditation, having a hobby where you always get to enjoy the fruits of your labor, saving money, and so much more. And so with that, I hope this video finds you and finds you well, out in the world and out in your garden, planting more abundance in your life. Take care, everybody. I'll be talking to you again soon.